välkommen. Jag sitter här med den amerikanska psykologen och författaren Guy Winch som är här i Sverige för att träffa mig, delta i TEDx Talks och framförallt prata om sin nya bok. Och det handlar om ett väldigt aktuellt och viktigt ämne, emotional first aid, hur vi kan ta hand om våra känslor, vårt inre på bästa sätt. How do people know if they are emotional injured? How can we know?
So in the book I try and give guidelines, but just in a very, very general way. When something happens like a rejection or a failure or something like that, it's normal to feel upset. But are you getting better? Are you feeling better a day later or a week later? If you've been dating somebody for 2 months and you're upset for 6 months, that's not okay, you know. If you've been dating somebody for 2 months and you're upset for 2 weeks, but you start to feel better, that is kind of reasonable. And so it's not that we always have to do something. Often when we get a cold, it gets better by itself. But sometimes we have a cough that lasts and lasts, and then we actually have to take more action. So the idea is to see, are you starting to feel better? Like any wound, it hurts a bit at the beginning, and it should gradually feel better pretty soon. If you don't feel it's improving, or certainly if it's getting worse emotionally, if it's something that you can't shake, you're in the office and all you can think about is this thing that happened and you can't focus on your work. Those are the kinds of signs that there's something there you need to address.
But is it enough to then go and read your book and practice what you write? Or should you go and talk to somebody? How should you handle it?
So I think that's a wonderful question, right? Because when it comes to physical wounds, we kind of have a good idea. When you get a cut, most of us can look at the cut and know that needs a band-aid or that might need stitches. We can actually tell the difference. When we are sick, we can usually tell the difference between I can just rest in bed and it should be okay, as opposed to I need to go to the doctor. We don't know how to do that with emotional wounds and psychological wounds. And so at the end of every chapter in the book that I talk about, I end every chapter with, and this is when you might need to see a professional. If this happens, if you're feeling this way, if you've tried these things, or if these are the thoughts. So I really try and help people understand that for some wounds, you do perhaps need to see a professional, but I think it's always best to try with the home remedy, which in this case would be the suggestions I make in the chapter.
Yeah, but why are we so bad and taken care of? Why don't we have more knowledge in general about this?
Well, who's teaching us? In other words, to me, the problem is, and this is why I wrote the book, there's all this science and all these scientists that spend years doing all these studies and finding really interesting, amazing things, but they write them in science journals that go in the library at the university, not even in your public library, not even down the street, not in the bookstore. And so who sees that? The other scientists, and that's it. And there's no one who then goes and brings, some journalists once in a while, but even the journalists are not that interested in psychological studies. They're more interested in, the new thing about this kind of trans fat or this kind of, physical thing. But no one is actually looking at the psychological studies and saying, oh, we just discovered this, here's what you need to know because this could be very useful. And because there's a gap like that is why I wrote the book. And the other thing is, children go to school for many years, and we have them captive in school, and we teach them all these things, the math and the history and the literature, which I think are wonderful things. But most children are not going to be using the math and the history and the literature. These things, these psychological ways of dealing, these ways of dealing with emotional wounds, everyone can use, and those are the things we don't teach, which is such a shame to me.
I think so too.